Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the 19th episode of the Progress with Us podcast with a incredibly special guest here today, Mr. Jordan Rassas.
It's a pleasure to have you on.
Lion Glass. Thank you for coming on, brother.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Good to be here with you all.
So I have been following your journey for maybe 2-3 months now after speaking to some of the sales reps that I work with who said, there's this guy on Twitter and he's just come onto the space and he's not selling anything and he's just kind of teaching, doing these free spaces. So I checked your stuff out. And then, obviously, you put the post on the other day saying that you were only up in not far from where we are and that you'd be down to do a podcast. So I would like to just give you free reign today to tell us your life story because we want to listen.
And we've heard you've got a bit of a crazy story.
And I think, obviously, a lot of it's documented on written, but to give people the opportunity to just sit down and watch this through and see where you came from would be great.
Yeah, no, let's do it. I think a big part for me when I even started putting my story online was putting out what I needed to see 10 years ago, genuinely talking to me at various stages of my life and just throwing out, you said I wasn't selling anything. That's the point. It's like, I just want to share the things that I needed to see and also talk to my sons in 20 or 30 years. If I get hit by a bus tomorrow or in a year's time, I'd love a world where they can just read all about their dad, like from the horse's mouth straight away in sort of real time, but backwards. It's cool.
I think that we kind of had that with, Dr. Rassas, who we had on the podcast recently. He was saying the same thing about that influence that he leaves on his kids and stuff like that in terms of just kind of setting that role model with his kids as well, innit? I think it's a big part of how you go about your business and your social life and your social media life nowadays.
Kids are everything. You'll hear this throughout the podcast and how much of a big part they are for me. When I grew up, we were very, very poor at the start, but I was one of a number of kids and I had brothers and sisters to bounce off. I had people that were giving us an environment to just play, to grow up in, good role models to look at. And I think a massive part for me is the role model I am to my boys. Genuinely, I think when you have kids, there's a quote, when you have kids, you become a ghost of their future. Yeah. Like you could die, but the things you teach them live on. The memories they've got, the lessons that you give them, they all live on with them. So for me, it's like, what an opportunity. Like yesterday, I was out with my boys, went out into the middle of the park, dropped to my hands and did some press-ups. I didn't need to do them, but I just wanted to observe how quick my two sons would drop and do some press-ups next to me. And they did straight away. And I was like, there's something in this. They just want to sponge. They want to replicate. So, yeah, they're one of my biggest motivations.
For the kind of audience that you've attracted on Twitter, I think you probably have struck a chord in a lot of, not just, you say you're doing this for your kids, but I think there are also a lot of young men in similar situations to us who are kind of swung into this online money space where a lot of it is, people lying about how much they're earning and there's quite a lot of unrealistic expectations and a lot of people who have only been in certain industries for a year or 2 years coming in and monetizing from selling their knowledge, which is great if they get results. But I think to have someone like yourself who has had 10 years of experience in an industry, as well as your life experience as well, to be able to come on and just share that knowledge, I think it's received by people in a different and a warmer way. I don't know if you found that on your sales spaces, but people just showing real gratitude for what you've done.
Positivity, I think. Yeah, no, absolutely. For me, when you look at when you look at the amount of DMs I get, people right now, I think young men in particular feel a little bit lost. They don't necessarily know what their mission is. They're on Grand Theft Auto, but without the missions being mapped out in front of them. And I think running around beating on NPCs gets boring after a while. Like it does. You can't play 100%. Grand Theft Auto without any missions. So I think these young people that are seeing my profile, what they see straight up and first hand is just a real guy that's living on a mission. I'm not a finished article. I'm not claiming to be some guru that's cracked the code. I'm very much on the same journey as everyone else. I'm nowhere near where I want to be in another 10 years, but I'm happy to just talk about it. And I think that social media point, right now, social media, it can be incredibly powerful. It's made this conversation happen. I'll give people an open insight into my mind, but it could also be dangerous. I compare social media now to the beauty magazines in the 80s, what they were to women, when people said to women, be careful, because reading these beauty magazines every day, you're going to see someone that looks better than you. Every page, you're going to see someone that looks better than you. It might not necessarily be real. It's a load of effects, but it's going to have a real impact on your psyche. And I think now what you see is a young person. You could be 20 to 25 years old. Like this would have messed me up, I think, if social media is as big as it was now
100%.
when I was 17, because you log in and in 1 hour on your lunch break, you'll see 500 things that are better than you. And actually, 490 of them won't even be real, because the people posting them would bite the finger off to swap places with you. So then that leads to this situation where even those that have the mission feel like their mission's not good enough. They feel a little bit like, shit, I need to do something else. I'm not good enough. And we've got this constant pressure, this constant rush. You know, the thing I advocate more than anything is dedicate 5 to 10 years of your life to something, to anything. And you'll find that you can unlock your life with it. It can be sales, great. It can be fucking gardening. Like, I know a gardener who started gardening when I started sales, and now he doesn't actually technically have to work a day in his life. But the point is, at no point did he stop gardening and flip-flap and try 5 different things because he saw Bill in a Lamborghini in Dubai and then John in a Range Rover. Like, it's just not a thing. So it's got to be conscious.
I was going to say, I think like the problem is kind of that having the perfect mix of being a role model and obviously having all that fancy stuff, but also having a relatability factor with it. But then a lot of these guys are so far out of, I don't know, just the perception of what they're actually doing compared to what they show is so far away compared to somebody, say, like yourself, where you have that relatability in your journey, but you've also still a successful person, you're still doing things, rather than just, oh yeah, I'm just stood in front of the Lambos doing this and doing that, and people thinking, oh, like, what am I doing with my life?
No, it's even what I put something up yesterday. I'm even happy to talk about losses, talk about bad things. You know, with my kids, I don't paint this pretty picture. I don't want my kids to think that life is all good and that everything their dad touched turns to gold. I really don't want that. I want them to think, whoa, loads of times my dad's come up against something, it hasn't worked, but he's picked himself up again and then he's fixed it. So that means we can pick ourselves up again. So I'll tell them, I'll show them the losses. Most people now are creating this illusion, even with their own children. And then when their children come up against something for the first time, the kids are like, shit, what do I do here? My dad never had to deal with this. My mum never had to deal with this. I'm all weak. I don't know what to do. And then they become all inside themselves, and I think it's a bit of an issue. So I'm just living naked. Like someone said to me, one of the biggest things is it's like you're naked about everything. It's like you're just open about everything. And it's like, yeah, I am, because I don't see what the downside to that can be. Like, truthfully, I just don't, because if you've been through a situation and you've survived it, there's someone else who's about to go into it for the first time. And maybe by hearing the fact that you've survived it, that'll be the thing that pulls them through it. So, yeah, keep being open. I recommend more people do it as well.
Yeah, and I also think that there is almost the people who do share losses sometimes almost do it in a bit of an artificial way, and it's almost like, all right, I'm going to show my losses to seem more vulnerable.
Yeah.
But you can tell when someone isn't being genuine about it, and there's kind of like a caveat to it where it's like, look at me, I've lost, but now I'm here, and you could be here too if for £997.
That's it. It's normally linked to a product that they're selling. Genuinely, there's none of my stories or none of my things that I would consider, you know, key messages that I would want to pass on to my children that I would charge people for. Like, it's just not even a thing. It's just, I can't even compute that world. You know, if I was to sell anything, then maybe the stories that I've been through and the type of person I am would add to the credibility as to who I am and why someone would want to buy it. But there'll never be that direct link. And I think a lot of this, for me, a bit of a shit test very early on, if I see someone's social media blowing up, is, what are they actually doing? Like, is this social media their source of income? Are they doing this to actually eat? Because at the end of the day, if they are, there's a chance it's artificial. Or is this a byproduct of their life? And if it's a byproduct of their life, then fucking hell, that might be worth following, because it's actually their life that's the interesting thing.
So for your kids then, where do you kind of, we spoke about this with a couple previous guests, where's the line of how do you filter what they're kind of taking in and not taking in? I don't know if they're getting, I know you spoke to me earlier just before the pod about your eldest one is probably getting to the age towards where he might start using social media or whatever. So how are you going to kind of filter the good and the bad of that kind of stuff and make sure that he's aware of what's not necessarily great to follow along with? Or are you just going to let him kind of go along on his own path and see how it goes?
No. It's way before that, like way beyond that. Like, I think the relationship I've got with my kids, certainly in today's world, and I believe as a man, you've almost got a duty of care now to have as much control of your family and your children as possible in today's world, because there's so many different agendas, there's so many different ideologies, there's so many different types of people So with my children, you know, we homeschool our children. My girlfriend's with us today, but she's a massive part of our life, of our family life, because we have kids at home. You know, she's pregnant again. We're going to have 5 kids basically, and right from the off, they see how we are, they see how we interact. You know, I'll even from the off, I'll even show them my social media, and I talk to my kids in a way where I'll say, oh yeah, this is just how Daddy speaks to people that like to know what Daddy's thoughts are. If you notice, Daddy doesn't follow anyone because there's nothing really relevant about this app.
Yeah.
And I follow 0 people on Instagram. That will always stay that way, so that my kids know that it doesn't even, I mean, even if I was to follow anyone, they'd be followed in secret, and I'd be following them off a burner account and still saying to my kids, yeah, it's an irrelevant thing. If something's free, my kids are educated into knowing that they're the product. Like, if anything is free, you are the product, so we don't really necessarily need it. So my kids just aren't like, they're wired up different. Like, my kids won't go into a restaurant and need electronics. They've never seen an iPad. Like, they've seen other people using them, but they're conditioned to just think maybe other people need them, and that's why other people's lives are as they are. But it's just like I just think right from the off, our kids are just so different. Like, it's not necessarily a control thing, because I don't think you can hammer against the nail that doesn't want to be hammered. When your back's turned, it's going to just go the other way. You know, these people that are like, I'm going to lock my son down, and I'm going to put all these restrictions on him. All that's going to happen is he's going to repel against them and push back 100%. Twice as bad, and all those things you didn't want, he's actually then going to do twice as much. So for me, it's a case of, right, lead by example. So I'll just show him. He doesn't see us pointlessly scrolling. Like, genuinely, he would never, none of my kids would ever look up and see their mum and dad looking on their phones on social media. Like, they just wouldn't be able to compute that being a thing. When we go on days out, my fiance and I, we swap phones, so that I can't even we can capture the footage we want of the kids, because most people's excuse is, oh yeah, we want to capture some footage and we want a camera, sound. We'll swap phones. And then we can't get distracted throughout the day, so our kids won't see us on a phone. Like, that's a big thing.
Yeah, that's good.
I want to touch upon what you said about a lot of people whose parents say that they're going to lock them down, that they will just rebel against it. And I think it's something that we see of people our age who had strict parents during primary, secondary school, and then university is kind of like their output to go and move away. And, you know, rather than going to university to get an education, it turns into, I can finally release all this energy that I've had, and that turns into drinking 4 times a week.
Most parents don't want the children to be successful versions of themselves. Most parents want their children to be projections of what their parents want them to be. That's basically it. Like, most parents today, if they have a kid, they don't want little Billy to grow up and be the best thing little Billy wants to be and the best thing that little Billy could be. They want their children to grow up and be what I want little Billy to be. You know, there's a fucking opinion, and there's a point with most parents where that opinion becomes a rule, like genuinely. And that rule then, if you don't follow, becomes a piece of alienation material that we'll then use against you at a later date. So most children, genuinely, Carl Jung talks about this. I think it's Carl Jung. He says your parents die twice. They die once when they really die, and then they die also when they're not really of any use to you. And I think what we see in the West a lot of the time is people get to the age of about 14 or 15. They're not really learning any lessons off the parents anymore, because the parents are trying to tell them something. They don't really want to listen. There's this massive disconnect because we're playing a different game to what they were playing 30 or 40 years ago. So then there's this like healing process, genuinely, that most people probably go through, where they just need to get out and fucking have 2 years, 3 years. So for me, it's like I'm observing that. And it's like, yeah, I don't even want that for my kids. I want them to be constantly on the journey, constantly motivated, constantly on the plan, because to me, it's like, it's going wrong. If I'm trying to push an agenda on them that they don't like, that they need to go and fucking get away from me and blow off a load of steam, it's not working. It's just not going to happen. So I've just got to make sure that the life I'm living, the adventures I'm going on, the things I'm doing are captivating enough for them to think, right, that's the way I need to live if I also want that. That's what we need to do if I also want that. When I look at the things that I've got in life now, they're all just me, either running towards things I saw as a child or running away from things I saw as a child. So it's like I'm just trying to create a load of good things for my kids to run towards, and then they'll just want to live their lives in a certain way. I won't need to, genuinely, they'll sort of police themselves because they'll have seen how to do it, they'll have seen the roadmap, they'll have seen how a man should live. This was the reason I lost 10 stone, because I was like, none of this makes sense if I'm 23 stone trying to talk to my kids and I can't even run up the stairs. So I was like, right, sound, let's see where we're at in a year. And I genuinely lost 10 stone in a year. And it's like, right, okay, I'll tell them that story as well. And actually, my children now just believe that it's normal that the Rassas have an 8-pack.
Yeah.
Because they're descended from that, and that is just their genetics. Now, imagine that world if I was 23 stone, they would have thought all sorts of different things.
I think that kind of guidance from example and influence and them kind of developing their own opinions from that, rather than what you were saying about parents just locking them down, is so much better as well.
I always had good role models. My dad was a very good role model. And he, you know, even in times when he was absent, not through his choice, but when he was absent in my life, I always had this idea of like a strong, powerful man that was always on a mission. And I think for me, that role model, like I said, that's taught me more than anyone that was trying to force me to do anything. Most people that tried to push me into something. One of the reasons I was not religious for so long in my life and then became religious was I just didn't want to look at it. I didn't want to look at religion. I didn't want to look at the books. I didn't want to look at anything because of all the people that were trying to push me into it. They were nothing like me. They were nothing like the people I was. Then when I started looking into religion, I was like, whoa, this maybe the people just weren't the ideal role models. And again, it forced me into living like a bit of a role model. I think more people should do it. Even if you're 20 years old now, you can benefit by living as a role model to 16-year-olds. Like you could just be thinking, right, what would the ideal role model 20-year-old be doing right now? Sound. I'm just gonna live how I needed to see someone living 4 years ago.
Yeah, I think I always envision myself in the future as like I want my kids to be like I want to be like dad. That's like the main thing that I always see.
And they will, man. They will 100%. All kids will either want to be like their parents or they'll subconsciously turn out like their parents. That one of them things will happen. So you want them to want to turn out like you, basically. Honestly, there isn't, and there never really is any points of disagreement in our house because they'll just want a certain thing or they'll live in a certain way. And even if they're aiming at a different thing, that's totally fine. It's like my job isn't to like castrate their lives and have them live under me forever. My job is actually to become useless to them by about 16 to 18, but for them to then go and have amazing lives, and I'll form a second type of relationship with them then.
Yeah. How much has your kind of approach to raising your 4 kids been built off how you lived your life as an early child? Like I know earlier you said that it's either what you wanted when you were a kid or what you were running away from.
Yeah.
Is that kind of something that you've really built into your
100%? It's something I think about every day. Like genuinely, even today when I was driving here, I was genuinely, it was like an interstellar moment when the main character's in the bookshelf talking to someone like 25 years ago. I was talking today in my head to that kid that was in an abuseful situation when I was 5 years old on top of my bed reading books, wondering where, and I just always knew. So for me, like when you look at my childhood, my dad when I was born was one of the most wanted men, and that was because of he was Palestinian at a time when the Palestinian uprising was, I mean, it's topical now, but it was the biggest thing that had pretty much ever happened in terms of conflict at that point in the world. That meant that for a lot of my early life, I was pretty much left with my mum. And my dad had to be going and doing other things. I was raised by my mum, my stepdad, and I had 5 step-siblings in the end. One of them was younger than me, but I was one of 6 children. My stepdad was an amazing role model. My dad was an amazing role model. My mum was a very, very strong woman, physically, wasn't an amazing role model. And I think my stepdad and my dad taught me amazing things as a man in terms of how I want to raise my children, which we can get into, and how I want to live as a man. And my mum taught me certain things. I mean, she taught me that I can take a hit, which is good, but she also taught me a lot about how I don't want to be, about how I don't want to be with my children. And genuinely, parenting is a conscious thing for me. It's something that when my kids go to bed, probably every day, I'll find a reason as to why I wasn't a good dad that day. Or I'll find a reason as to why I did something that I shouldn't have done that day. You know, yesterday I was putting Wolf on I can't remember what we were doing. We were going to see Tinkerbell the Fairy, and he got a bit scared, and I went, don't be silly. And I'd called him silly, and it grated on me for about an hour and a half. I was like, why have I just called him silly? That's terrible language. I don't need to be talking like that to him. I don't need to be doing that. I need to go and rewrite that whole Tinkerbell situation and that memory, and we just went and did it all again, and I was like, right, I'll sort this. But yeah, it's for me, it's massive. Like, I've got I think having children gives you the chance to recreate all of the good parts of your own childhood and redefine all of the bad parts. Yeah. Like, that's it. That's how I would describe it. So it's like all those shitty memories that I had, I can just repaint them better with my kids, and I can understand them fully. And I think you've got to be in tune with your inner child if you want to be a good parent. Just think about what you experienced as a kid. Most people, they're having kids and they're living their own life and just seeing the kids as separate people altogether. When I'm with my kids, I just think, what can I remember when I was 4 or 5? Like, what did I want? How would I have reacted? Like, genuinely, if I'm trying to get my little boy to help me tidy up, I'll put myself in his shoes and think, what would have worked for me, rather than just shouting at him, like most people will do. And it just works straight away. It's a partnership.
Something I was kind of interested in is how you said you've obviously become a lot more religious, and do you think that's kind of had an influence on how you've brought up your kids and stuff like that, or not necessarily? As I know for some people it is quite a key role in how they bring up their kids, depending on how religious and what they follow. But I don't know what kind of it had with you.
It all wraps up. So for me, when I jumped 2 feet into religion when I had a couple of experiences that happened that we'll get into, and I think it all wraps up in the sense that for me, when I even looked at religion, I looked at Christianity. I didn't know things like what church to go to. I didn't know what to do. Yeah. Someone said to me, right, for a week, you're a good reader, Jordan. Start reading the Bible. They said, just read it because you've never actually read it. And then they just said, why don't you do these things for a week? Pretend, even if you just pretend that God is real, just pretend he's real and that he loves you as much as you love your kids, or maybe even more than you love your kids. Just pretend that for a week. Then, rather than thinking anything about religion or Christianity, just imagine that the whole Jesus Christ thing is just an abstraction of a perfect man. So then just live how this man who loves you would also want you to live. And the sort of partnership is, if you live in the image of this abstraction, which is this, if you sort of live as close as you can, you're never going to get ideal, but if you live as close as you can to this ideal man, and you do it in partnership with this sort of person that you believe is your loving father, and I was all skeptical, and it was like, do this for a week and start doing it and start living your life, and then see where we're at in a week. Genuinely, I've never ever looked back. Like, I can't actually believe it took so long for me to start doing this. So for me, it's like it all wrapped up into one, because if ever I'm not what religion gave me, and I always knew in my head there was something bigger than the doctrines that we see today of like government and law and shit, like the control mechanisms we see today. Yeah. Religion gave me someone to answer to, like every single day, someone that I'm accountable to. If I've cut some corners that day, I know that my dad upstairs knows that I've cut some corners that day. And if something ends up not working out in my favour, it's sort of on me there, because I know how he wants me to work. So for me, it's like, I hold myself to account to him, and then by me doing that, my children automatically see me living in a certain way. I don't even push them into religion. I would never, ever, ever dream of doing that. What I would do though is, I'd think, right, how can I push my kid into religion? What does he like? You know, if it's cool things, if it's holidays, if it's like a cool athletic body or whatever this kid thinks is cool, I'll go and attain it. And then when he's like, whoa, how did you do that, Dad? I'd just be like, yeah, it was easy. It was just in partnership with God, son. You should try it. Yeah. And it's like, that's how you sort of do it. You lead through example. My kid now, he actually walks around singing about God. And I've never ever once have I sat down and had a God conversation with him. Yeah. But it's just become part of his life. It's just like, and he wouldn't even know a world where that wasn't a thing, where we thank God. So
I was reading something interesting the other day that I wanted to speak to you about. And it was someone writing about kind of the re-emergence in the States and the UK of like a kind of cultural form of Christianity, where it's kind of like a group of people who agree with the commandments of Christianity and the messages that it's sending, but don't necessarily believe enough in the kind of like the theoretical side of things, with like Jesus rising from the dead. Like, if I was to put that Sony FXV camera in front of where he was buried, would you see a man walk out? And it's kind of like this emergence of people who are like, they're halfway there, but they don't believe in that side of things. Yeah. Do you think that the things that have benefited you the most with religion have been more the cultural aspect of things, or the belief in the almost supernatural side of things?
So I think one of the reasons that people are so turned off from religion is we view things nowadays under an objective lens of science, okay? So we hear a story about Noah's Ark. We hear a story about a man who, when everything was good, refused to stop working.
Yeah.
And when people were saying, slow down, Noah, he said, no, I'm not slowing down, because shit is coming, basically, in the form of a flood, and it's going to destroy every one of you, and I'm building my ark to survive this flood. There's nothing that anyone can do to stop me building whilst things are good. Then all of a sudden this flood happens that wipes out everyone who didn't build an ark, and lo and behold, Noah and his family are sound because they built an ark. Most people will see that story and they'll be like, right, I can't scientifically comprehend a world where the entire planet is covered in water, so the whole thing's irrelevant. See you later, bye. I'll see that story and think, right, this thing was written. I mean, scientific words have only really been invented in the last 400 or 500 years. The language we use now has only really been invented in the last 600-700 years, depending on where you're from. So I'm thinking, how has this book that's thousands of years old survived till today? What is the actual story trying to tell us here? Because science only came around in the Age of Enlightenment. Maybe it's not trying to tell us a scientific story. Maybe it's designed so it can fucking survive until 2024. So then I was like, is there any abstractions in that story? Is there any abstractions in this story about an ark and a flood? Well, maybe there is. Maybe if you start actually building on your life for 5 years, maybe if you get a good family around you, maybe if you get a wife, maybe if you get children, maybe if when everyone else is telling you slow down, slow down, slow down, you carry on, carry on, carry on. Maybe when the flood comes, and a flood will come in everyone's life, whether that's a phone call you get at 3 a.m. in the morning, whether that's someone dying on you, whether that's your wife leaving you, whether that's a business, something's going to happen.
Yeah.
You're going to have a flood. There's nothing anyone can do to avoid the flood of life. And the flood is in every single religion ever. There's a Babylonian flood myth. There's a Christianity flood myth. You know, you could go further and further back and find fairy tales that are 20, 30,000 years old that talk about floods that come and wipe out everyone other than the people that were preparing for the floods. So for me, the story there is sort of, right, work hard, build your ark. I don't know what your ark looks like. For me, it's having a decent body and being healthy, having a good family around you, full of love, having some income that means you can do what you need to do and you can, you know, have that freedom, and then living life in a good way. You do those sorts of things, you've built your ark, and then when a flood comes, it might not be nice, but you'll survive it.
Yeah.
You might not be one of the 1 in 3 people that are on antidepressants and then killing themselves. Like, genuinely. So I think, for me, what I started doing was looking at stories in the Bible and trying to, first thing to do was uncondition my mind to taking them literally and thinking, right, what's the story that they're trying to tell me here? What is the thing they're maybe trying to tell me here? Because maybe they don't mean a scientific, literal flood, because those words were only invented in the last 800 years. So what do they actually mean here? What's the message? What is the message? And I'm just constantly thinking, what is the message? And for me, I think one of the issues now, people are trying to take things too scientifically.
Yeah.
And not understand the reality of the message they're giving out. Because already someone watching me say it like this will be like, oh yeah, that's a good point actually. Well, why? I've not said anything there. I've just used an abstraction to actually help you understand something that is just a really important point for you to understand.
Yeah.
So then when you start reading these books through that light, it's like, wow, this is important. I actually now view it as a bit of a walkthrough for life. And I think going back to that point around people are sort of now coming out and wanting to fall in love with Christianity, if you will, or with religion, whatever religion it is, but maybe falling out of love with certain elements of it. You know, for Christianity in particular, I think one of the issues now is humans have been involved in it. Humans have been able to get, to corrupt certain elements of it. A lot of Christianity now, it all it does is tells the good news of Jesus Christ, which is great news. It's good news. It really is. But that's not what Jesus Christ was talking about when he arrived. That's not the actual gospel that he was talking. He was actually giving some very important messages. What was he saying? Christianity doesn't necessarily go into that today. If Christianity nowadays showed young men the things that Jesus was actually saying, that in itself would start changing it. But nowadays, Christianity, it's become more of a let's worship Jesus Christ rather than let's show them the things he was saying and the messages he was teaching and why he was teaching them and the impacts they were having.
Yeah. Do you think that kind of, sorry I cut you off there, but I was going to say, do you think that the whole rise of all the crazy stuff on social media, this and that, and causing everybody to kind of hyper-analyse everything has taken away from that type of stuff with religion in terms of seeing the actual message rather than just looking and being like what you said earlier, taking it super literal and kind of pushing it to the side?
Yeah, I think, well, I think the one thing that we're seeing now is a lot of people have, I wouldn't necessarily say a God-sized hole, but I'd say a moral framework-sized hole in the heart right now. If you think about it, a lot of people today, they're not fortunate enough to have been raised by, really good families with really good role models to look up at that would give them a really good moral framework. So Nietzsche said, a few hundred years ago, God is dead. And he didn't say, ha, 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 God is dead. He said, God is dead and this is a major problem. Across a series of later lectures, he went on to then explain what is going to be the moral framework of man, what is going to define what mission man wakes up for and does, and the day-to-day structure of life. What until humanity comes up with its own new moral framework and codifies it, because actually religion, Christianity, a lot of English common law was built out of that, was built out of the doctrines in religion. So I think for me, there's just this massive need now. People are waking up, it's the age of information. People now, it's all linked. You've got these young people now that know they've got an absence of a mission. They know they feel a little bit lost. They know that there's a bit of a hole sort of thing. They then come across information. And I just think for me, we're in this interesting time now where I believe religion will make a bit of a resurgence. I believe that, I actually think, quote unquote, it's going to be cool to be religious again in another 5 to 10 years. I really do think we're going that way, because I think young people now are actually starting to be able to, I think the age of Netflix maybe helps, because we can now understand things on a different level. And actually we are prepared to watch a Hollywood movie and not necessarily take it literally. You could go and watch a movie now and it could make you cry for an hour afterwards. And none of that is real.
Yeah, that's true.
But why does it make you cry? Because it hit very real sentiments to you. Or that movie could actually go and tell you things that change your life. I mean, maybe that would be the way to go. Maybe if someone brought the Bible out as a Netflix series for young people, they'd watch it and they'd be like, whoa, that's cool. And they'd be able to interpret it all differently.
I remember watching a Jordan Peterson lecture where he broke down the biblical themes throughout Harry Potter. Wow. And it's really interesting, the way that J.K. Rowling kind of made. There's a lot of similarities. Have you ever 100%. Watched Harry Potter?
Yeah.
And
Harry Potter was a big part of my life. He was one of my oldest role models as a kid. Genuinely, when I was 11, 12, I was living how he was in his school. Genuinely, I was.
But that thing in the Chamber of Secrets, he breaks down how the basilisk represents a Bible story. I don't know which one necessarily it is. It's like someone who, I should have come prepared. But honestly, it's a very interesting lecture, and a lot of the highly emotional peaks in Harry Potter, things that happen at the end of the films, there is a lot of comparisons between that and Bible stories, and you see how people love Harry Potter. When you look at the books, there's thousands of people there. I still watch them to this day and love them. And
so they're a religion. So how does a woman go from single parent living in a 1-bedroom flat to richer than the Queen in 3 years? Now, that's not normal. That's not a product. That's almost it is a religion. Harry Potter has become a trademark. It's become, quote unquote, the wizarding world of Harry Potter. It's become a religion. Star Wars in itself is a religion. Do you think in 1,000 years' time, when people look back and see the wizarding world of Harry Potter at Universal Studios and they see everything that everyone was doing and all the mania around it, that they'll think it wasn't some kind of worship? So here's what I believe. The people that are currently obsessed with things like Harry Potter, with things like Star Wars, with all these latest trends, they're the people who 600-700 years ago were the people that were obsessed with religion. We are biologically hardwired to want some kind of framework, to want to worship something. You can't tell me it's not a religion when people are queuing up at midnight to buy a book. You can't tell me it's not a religion when they queues 200 persons deep to watch Star Wars, which, by the way, isn't real. And it's that's real. Go and question Harry Potter to a Potter fan and go and tell them it's not real. And go and tell them Harry Potter's stupid because none of it's real. And they'll be like, yeah, but a lot of what he goes through is real. And a lot of what they talk about is real. That doesn't matter. It's okay, yeah, fair enough. Go and say to someone who doesn't like wrestling, who loves wrestling, it's not real. They'll say, yeah, I know it's not real. It doesn't matter. That's not why I watch it. I don't watch it under the lens of thinking this is real. They don't sell out 70,000 people at WrestleMania who all think it's real. 69,500 of them, if their life depended on it, would admit it wasn't real.
Yeah, very true.
But they'd still be buying the tickets, and it still captivates people.
Yeah.
And this is the sort of thing that thousands of years ago, when it didn't exist, it would have been religion, because people need it.
I think that's great.
There's
I
that
think that's
culture
great.
around it as well, isn't there? In terms of like Star Wars and Harry Potter, like you were just saying.
Degrees of religion.
Yeah,
You know,
it
you've got
is.
your priests, your high priests, your canons, your bishops, you've got your daily followers. You've got honestly, these things have become a religion. I'm
Yeah,
telling
they
you.
do. I mean, the people that are super into it, like all the, I don't know what you call it, fan, whatever, I feel like they do actually kind of live it like a religion as well. The way that they kind of have these stories built up around certain characters and this and that. I think it is kind of the same.
Humans,
same thing
all
as-
humans worship something. Like, as a human, you always worship something.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. You don't get to pick whether you worship something or not. You sort of just get to pick what it is and, like, what things you like and what you want to choose to start worshipping. And a lot of these, you know, I used to have a guy in the office that I used to work at. He's a good mate of mine, actually, but we were totally different as people. We used to have a famous Friday debate every single Friday. He was trademark atheist. You know, he had something for everything I had to say. But I used to say to him, "You're not an atheist, man. I've never known anyone love Star Wars as much as you. You're not an atheist." And he'd laugh and be like, "What are you on about? It's not a religion." And I'd be like, "Nah, man, it is. Like, you love it. You've basically got a Star Wars room at your house. You go and watch the movies. You go with your wife. Like, we're laughing, but you could answer everything about it. You could tell me about the main characters. If I said to you, why don't you like certain characters, you'd have a whole reasons as to why, and there'd be genuine reasons with realistic traits that you could talk about. You're fully involved in this, man, and none of it's real."
Yeah.
And he was like, "Whoa."
What do you think you worship then before you kind of got into religion?
Feeling good in the present moment. Like, genuinely, I think the
Yeah.
thing I was worshipping was the feeling of feeling happy in the present moment on the whim. You know, I just wanted to feel, I was worshipping status, I was worshipping looking good, I was worshipping attention, but it ultimately all stemmed back from this need for me to want to feel good. I just wanted
Yeah.
to feel good in the present moment. I didn't know what would do it. I started throwing money at things. I started fucking living life in a crazy way to live your life, but I thought that would give it me, like, genuinely. From the years of 17 to 25, I was worshipping money. I was worshipping lifestyle. I was worshipping just feeling good in the present moment, like I said. And I really was. Like, that wasn't just the thing I was aiming at. It was also the reason I was doing everything. And it was all just this weird, that was definitely my God for that period.
So I know that you do a lot of stuff outside in nature with your kids, and that seems to contrast massively to the 7 years that you were grounded when you were that sort of age. What were you doing in that time when you were grounded in a one-bedroom flat in Blackpool?
Do you know what? Only just then when you said that did I realise that, like, maybe even me being outdoors so much with my kids is actually a response to how much time I wasn't. Like, genuinely, I've just had that realisation there. It's like, you know, when I said about running away from things, I didn't even realise, like, every day, even my missus, consciously I say to her, what are we doing today with them? We need to have something to do with them. So for me, when I was grounded, I mean, we'd got out of the flat at this point. So this is when we were living in a bigger house, 3 bedrooms. I had a shared bedroom with my brother. And the rules, I mean, my house was crazy. So I had a mother who was when my dad had me, he came over to the UK and he wanted to have me with a fighting British family. So he found a family of gypsies, basically, from Oswald Twistle in the middle of East Lancashire. He got the roughest woman he could find within that family, got her pregnant. That was my mum. Now, my mum was one of a load of very strong children who all happened to be boys. And she was the youngest one, and they all used to be. I mean, some of her stories, she probably had all sorts of trauma. So she just didn't know how to react to me. You know, when I was born, this intelligent kid came along that was autistic with Asperger's, and she just didn't know what to do with me. Like, every 3 or 4 steps when I was 3 or 4, I'd touch the floor and look around, and I'd have another 3 steps and I'd touch the floor because I was just so fucking autistic. My mum would just start hitting me when I started doing that, or when I'd question her on things, on reasons why. Very early on, I was more clever than all of my stepbrothers. You know, my stepbrothers who were... You know, my stepdad was an amazing guy, but you could see that me and these kids were totally different. They were getting, like, motivated to get a good grade and we'll give you £20. I'd say, well, can I have £20 for my A stars? It'd be go to your room. You know, stop showing off to your brothers. Everything. It was really crazy, my upbringing. And I would answer back. I would question everything. My stepdad, unfortunately for me, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, but he was always out working. He was trying to make sure that he took us from this 1-bedroom council flat to actually the ability where we had somewhere we could live. But that meant that my mum had us day in, day out. Now, my brothers pretty much all went out and did their own thing. My mum just didn't know how to run me, didn't know how to have me. So it would be, to your room, Jordan, spend your time in your room. I'd come home from school, genuinely, at 3 o'clock. I'd have to go upstairs, get my uniform off, fold it up, put it on top of my drawers, and then I wouldn't be allowed out my room again. I'd be shouted down for dinner, shouted back up, told to go back upstairs after dinner, and then I'd be downstairs the day after for breakfast. The only thing my mum would give me, because it's not like we didn't have tellies. We did. I had a box TV. We didn't have Netflix or anything, and it had one of them video cassette things underneath it. The only things I had, basically, was Only Fools and Horses on video. I had the whole series, and I promise you, boys, I could tell you pretty much anything from any episode, word for word, on that bloody series. That's all I had. And then I had books. Like, truthfully, she just got me books, book after book after book. I became obsessed with books very early on. I was like Matilda. The program Matilda, that probably even kept me going. I was saying this to my girlfriend the other day. I was saying how things like that kept me going as a kid, because I could see this child that was really clever, that had these sorts of powers, that was getting beat down on by all of her family. You know, my brothers used to twat me, my mum used to beat me up for answering back. The qualities that I had, my intelligence, if anything, were seen as flaws in my family. Genuinely, it was stop showing off, even if I tried to give them some knowledge, stop being a know-it-all. Like, genuinely, and it was like the absolute opposite. So for me, I just used to immerse myself into books. I'd sleep in a upper bunk of a bunk bed, and I promise you, I'd lie in the middle of it, and I'd have books piled 3 or 4 book high, and it'd start off with like one book next to me. By the time I was 15, 13, I'd say, I was sleeping on the top bunk of a bunk bed, surrounded by actual books, 3 or 4 levels high, everything from Harry Potter to fiction, other fiction books to factual books. I was just reading, researching, anything. When I went through my GCSEs, I talk quite openly about the fact that I just aced all of my GCSEs. My English class in particular, I was that disruptive in English that I got banned from my English lessons. Truthfully, my form tutor at school, Mrs. Fewson, I'll never forget her. Hey, Mrs. Fewson, if you see this. But she was ruthless as a teacher, but she was always quite nice to me. She always had a bit of a soft spot, but she was also the head of English, and she was like a fearsome lesbian. Now, she was scary. You didn't want to piss her off. Anyway, when I got banned from English, her approach to me was basically, she had a book cabinet that was like this size of this room in her classroom, and every single time I was scheduled to be in an English lesson, I had to go to Mrs. Fewson's class. She'd open a book cabinet and just let me in, and I just had to sit there, and I'd just get the textbooks. But then from that, at year 9, what I realised was all of the answers to these questions they're giving us are just in these books. Like this textbook that they're giving us, I was looking at all these other subjects, so then I was like, well, this physics thing, it's all in this textbook, like EdXL. I can remember the textbooks. They were either AQA or EdXL.
They still are.
Right, there you go. So I was like, right, all I need to do is just remember this 400-page EdXL textbook. It's going to be a piece of piss. If I'm not in any of these lessons, or if I'm grounded at home, I'm just going to go home and remember them. So I'd be in an exam, and it's not necessarily that I had the knowledge. Well, I did, but I just had the ability to genuinely I'd see a question, and I'd be like, where was that in the book? And I'd just try and visualize it. I'd be like, oh yeah, there it was, and there would be my answer. And I just had like time surrounded by books. I've always loved books. Books are what helped me even more than teachers in high school, genuinely, because I was just very early on, even when I realised this, my history lessons, I realised very early on, were just fill the gap exercises, like 90% of these lessons. So I was like, this is just crazy. I can just read the whole curriculum in a month. And then it's like these lessons are really going to be difficult though, because then it became a bit counterintuitive, because I couldn't even sit through a fucking lesson then, because I ended up knowing what the teacher was going to speak about, because I'd already read the curriculum and I'd just read on past the bit that we were told to read that day. But I had no other choice really. Like truthfully, when I look back now about the upbringing I had from my mum, it's quite scary, but I don't know what I'd really change. And the reason it scares me is because if I had a kid that was autistic like me, let's be honest, maybe I would have been totally different now if she wrapped me up in a totally different way. She was a bit brutal with me, and she made me have to survive in the real world. She made me have to, I wouldn't have even been able to have a conversation 25 years ago, but she made me have to be able to go out and interact. She also made me knowledgeable. She gave me access to nothing other than books. Like, as crazy as it sounds, on the flip side, on one hand, she was leaving me locked in my bedroom, but on the other hand, she would go and get from Quick Save in Cleveland's the latest Harry Potter when it was released at midnight, just so that she could make sure that I read it the day after, and I'd have it finished in 2 days. And then I'd just be rereading it, like, again and again and again and again. I read The Order of the Phoenix about 15 times. Not even joking.
What's the chunky one? Is it The Order of the Phoenix? Which one's the biggest one?
I think it is The Order of the Phoenix, or is it the fourth one? I can't remember. The fourth one is The Goblet of Fire, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think it might be that. It's either that or The Order of the Phoenix, yeah. But one of them two was big. Order of the Phoenix was my favourite. But yeah, I mean, it was just a massive part. Books, all I would do is read. Like, that was it, to pass time. It was just read.
So because you wanted to go and study law at one of the top universities, was there any reason that you chose law? Was it just because you thought it was a high-paying job, or was there some element of kind of nobility in it where you wanted to go and be a lawyer and help people?
Yeah, no, I come from a very strong and wealthy family, and intelligent family back in Jerusalem, back in the Middle East. A lot of my family back there are in powerful positions in law, so law is something that my family have either gone down military route or a law route, basically. Interestingly, when my dad came to the UK, he spent about 10, 15 years right at the top of the nightlife industry, running some of Europe's largest super clubs in Blackpool, when Blackpool was the heyday. So he had the Palace when it was Europe's largest super club. But he transitioned out of that, and in the early 2000s, I watched my dad. So this is going back into the earlier stuff we said. I watched my dad in the early 2000s at the age of, he was in his 40s, maybe early 50s. I watched him enroll at Bolton University. You can Google his name now and you'll find it. I watched a 50-year-old man enroll at Bolton University with 18 to 21-year-olds and go and land their highest ever law degree, ever.
I didn't even know Bolton had a university.
Google Bolton University, Bashir Rassas, you'll see the story. They held a ceremony where they gave him an award because no one had ever scored that high at that university for that law degree. And I was sat there thinking, when I was, 15, 16, I was like, this guy has just redefined his whole life once and became a nightclub magnate. Now he's redefined his whole life again and become a lawyer. Fast forward another 5 years, he was working on cases for people like David Cameron and Harry Redknapp. I was like, right, this is interesting. Maybe I should get into that. So he was also trying to, not push me, but he was saying, get into this, you'd be good at it, you can articulate. He actually thinks law is just sales. You're just selling to a judge, or you're selling to a jury. And he thinks that that's also where I'll end up one day. Maybe I will. But that's what was pushing me to law. It was always either, for me, I was either going to go down the military route and join the RAF. Thank God I didn't, looking at what my views are now, and I think I was very much propagandized into that. Or it was going to be the legal route, because then I can use, all of our family, we have the ability to speak, we're quite intelligent, so it was going to be, let's go and do it. And the plan was going to be to be a lawyer. It was when I fell into sales and I saw the money that the sales closers were earning that I said, right, I'm never going to be a lawyer now. At this point, it would genuinely be like a backstep if I was to go and study law. Like, I genuinely think my family that are lawyers don't believe the money that I'm earning or that you can earn in sales. And I can't believe that they can't believe it. It's just crazy. And I think they don't believe how much money they could earn. My dad was a salesman. My word, it'd be unreal.
Talk to us a little bit about that period between getting into sales and kind of having the situation that happened with your first wife, that first kind of stint in sales. Obviously.
Yeah. That whole period of my life was probably the most turbulent period of my life ever. When I was 15 years old, things hit a real tilt with my mum. I left the house. I left the house at 14 because I started building a bit of a relationship back up with my dad. Mm-hmm. And my dad, although he was never in the UK, gave me a property to go and stay in. And he was like, anything's better than being at your mum's. He said, I'll be there sometimes I won't. I don't know whether that was good or not, but I just had a place to go and stay that wasn't my mum's. When I was 15, I then moved in with my girlfriend. Like, genuinely, I moved in with my girlfriend and her, because her parents could see, like, her mum, she was a very wealthy businesswoman, and she could see that my mum had not raised me right. And she said, just come and live with us, we'll look after you. She was actually God probably sent me a second mum, to be fair, and I burnt it a little bit with her, which I shouldn't have done. But I've started actually speaking to her again now, that lady. But for me, my mum moved to Spain. She moved to Spain when I was 15. I then moved in with my girlfriend. There was 2 years as I was going through college that things were maybe normal, if you will, as I left school and then I moved into sixth form. And then when I was 17 years old, my stepdad, who was one of the only positive influences in my life, died. I found out, I was on the phone to him. Half an hour later, I was on the phone to him and he was drunk. Half an hour later, after being told that his son was in a bar in Marbella, my 14-year-old brother, who was in like a restaurant at a birthday party. It was only 5 in the afternoon. No, it was about, at their time, what are they, 2-3 hours ahead? It was about 7-8 o'clock, let's say, roughly. He'd been told that my little brother was in a restaurant and there was some trouble at this birthday party thing. So my stepdad, on the phone to me, said, it'll be all right. I'm going to ride my motorbike 20 or 30 mile an hour down to the car. I know I've had a drink, and then I'm going to get in the car and drive slowly to him. I need to get Oliver. And I was the last person he ever spoke to when I was 17. I rang back for an update half an hour later, and the Policia Locale answered to tell me that my stepdad had died in a motorbike crash. So at 17 years old, I was then like, what is going on here? Like, what is happening? I then got on a plane the day after. My dad, my real dad, told him what had happened. He got to my house within 40 minutes, booked flights for me to get over to Spain. He said, you're becoming a man now, son. He said, this point now, you've become a man. You've got to get over there. You've got to get your mum. You've got to bring her back. You've got to get your little brother. You've got to bring him back as well. I had a 14-year-old little brother at the time. So I went on a plane and we landed in Marbella, basically, where it had happened. Honestly, within 12 hours of my stepdad dying, I was at the location where it happened, picking bits of his brains up off the floor, because the Spanish police had basically thrown a bucket of sand down on the floor. That had basically been their clean-up, thrown a bucket of sand down and left it. But then at that point, I had a 3 or 4 week period where I had to pick my mum up, literally this woman who'd abused me every day, to the point where she could even carry on in life, because we had my little brother. I had to convince her to come back from Spain, because their goal, her and my stepdad, was to retire in Spain. I had to fly her home with my brother. On my mum's 40th birthday, we repatriated my stepdad's body. So I was still 17 at this point. My girlfriend was pregnant. My stepdad and my mum had only found out like a month before. Things were starting to look up. Then on my mum's 40th birthday, flying back from Spain, I had to fly the body home. And I remember going through the airport, and we were honestly, when all the, you can see all of the suitcases on the tarmac about to go on the plane. As we were walking to the plane, you could also see a coffin just on the tarmac. Yeah. My mum dropped to the floor. My little brother dropped ahead of her. And I was just stood there rooted, holding these fucking bags. And I just remember thinking, you're just a man now. This is it. You don't know what your life looks like, but you've got to get these people through it. So for about 6 to 8 weeks before I got into this sales job, my life was just going to my mum's house, taking my brother out, taking the dog for a walk. They brought the dog home from Spain. Making sure my mum wasn't having a panic attack, because she was. She got him cremated and slept in the same room as the ashes for about 6 weeks. She couldn't even take them out of the room. And I was giving her therapy, basically, throughout this. Then I needed to earn some money, and I got this sales job. So at this point, when I was 18, I'd started, right, okay, I've been through this trauma. I've not yet really grieved my stepdad. I've not really had a chance to, because I've had to become the man. I've had to sort my mum out, sort my little brother out, sort myself out. I'm now raising this kid. I then had 2 years, 18 to 20, where things were going really well. Like, things from a sales perspective were going good. I went from an SDR into a closer. I started earning decent money. I was on 100 grand plus a year from 19 years old. Yeah. Found a girl, married her at 21. I thought, this is it. I'm never looking back now. 6 weeks after the wedding, she leaves me. She takes all my money, takes my Range Rover. I find out she's been having an affair with a 40-year-old guy. At this point, I'm 21 years old. I'd buried my stepdad 3-4 years prior. I'd put everything into this and thought this was my future. Then I was in a position where my wife's left me at 21 for a 40-year-old horse dentist. And I was like, holy fucking shit, like, this is it. Like, at that point, I was suicidal. Mm-hmm. The only thing I wasn't good at was killing myself. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here right now. So genuinely, from that point, I hit rock bottom. I went straight back to my dad's. I was like, Dad, this sales job, it's all worthless. The money's all worthless. I couldn't even sleep at night. I was crying myself to sleep. I was trying to get in bed with him. I was like, at 21 years old, I was saying, Dad, I need to sleep in your bed tonight. I can't even lie on my own. I can't fucking sit there. I'm crying. I'm choking myself up. My dad was like, Jordan, you got to get through it. You got to get through it. He said, no day has killed you yet. You just got to fucking get through it. I remember the day he found out I had sertraline in my house, antidepressants. He came in and he trashed all of my drawers, my chest of drawers that they were in. He took it, emptied it into the bin, and then sledgehammered all my drawers. And he just was like, now you've got no drawers for your stuff, because they were also tainted by the box they were in. But you've got to keep going, Jordan. You've got to just get over it. And basically what then started to do was put my life back together. And things were going well until about 6 weeks after that. Well, things weren't going well, but about 6 weeks after that, I met a guy in Blackpool who was a big drug dealer, big drug dealer. And I met this kid. And 2 things then happened. First thing that happened was he showed me more compassion than anybody had ever showed me. Like genuinely, within an hour of conversation, this guy, and I don't even think it was fake. He genuinely cared about the situation I was in more than anyone had really cared. It was real, and he was like, "What the fuck? Like, you've been fucked over. This has happened. No one really cares. You're out there on your own. The world is fucked." Then the second thing that happened in my head, I was like, this guy's not getting fucked over like that, is he? Like, I was just observing him, like, and everything that was happening, and I was thinking, I've apparently got everything. I'm this clever guy. Yeah, look, another woman's left me. Another fucking thing's happened. You know, here I am getting chewed up and spat out again and crying myself to sleep at night. Right, that's my next mission. I'm going to become more like that guy. Fast forward 12 months, and I had genuinely quit a job that was paying me £250,000 a year to go and be a gangster in Blackpool. You know, genuinely, I met a kid about 3 years ago. We were in Manchester chatting, and this guy, he's a big guy in Manchester. And he used to say to me, like, he said, "I'm glad you've turned your life around. I'm glad you're out." He said, "The thing that we were always thinking when you got into it," he said, "I'll be honest with you, one of the reasons you got as high as you did," he said, "was because everyone was a bit fucking uneasy, unaware. We were like, who the fuck's this Palestinian guy that's really fucking clever, that clearly doesn't need to do this, that's now getting into this out of nowhere?" He said, and straight away, everyone was sort of on edge. People were all like, "What the fuck's this guy?" He was on £250,000 before he started, and he's backed by some Palestinians. Holy shit. Now, the truth is, I was like a Napoleon. I was trying to conquer the world so no woman would ever leave me again. I was like, fuck that. I'm getting myself into a position where I'll be fearless, you asked me what I was worshipping. I was worshipping status. You know, I wanted to be that guy. Go and look at pictures of me in Dubai, you know, tattooed head to toe, white hair, stood on top of the 5 Palm in a 10 grand Gucci tracksuit with my Lamborghini Huracan parked outside. That was the image I wanted to put out. It was, you can't fuck with me. But deep down, it's because I was broken. You know, what people didn't see was that Lamborghini, I was also parked in it listening to Post Malone, "You Probably Think That You Are Better Now," crying into a subway. They don't see that. They saw the fucking Instagram photo. There's still a video right now, if you put in Jordan Rassas, of me racing them fucking Lamborghinis in Dubai that was posted by a Gucci page. And that was the life that I was living. That's what I thought it was all about. But I was just insecure. So that period of my life, man, the sales was the good thing. Like, that was something that I knew I was good at. But then because of all the trauma, I burnt it all. Like, fast forward to when I was 25, and, you know, I was still half into sales, half out. But at a point when I was 22, 23, I was just using my commissions to pay my bills. Like, genuinely, I was going and smacking 200k years just so that I could use the money as a bit of a cash flow thing in the other world. And actually, when I got to 25 and I hit crisis point, that's when, you know, some of the best minds in the world sat me down and they were like, right, you need to look at what you were good at. You need to look at what you had, and you need to start rebuilding these component parts. You need to start dropping the parts of you that aren't necessarily real or shouldn't have been there in the first place, and like rebuilding some of the good parts. I think when I was 24, 25, one of the reasons I was so depressed at that point is because not only was I far away from where I wanted to be, but I'd pretty much burnt everything. You know, at a point in my life, I was sat in Sheffield, warring with gangsters, sat there thinking, I've got kids that aren't seeing me. I've got an ex-missus that hates me. I've got no income right now. And not only that, but I've quit 4 separate jobs that were paying me 200k a year, like at various points. I can't even be a gangster anymore because everyone in that world hates me. In fact, there were certain places where if I went, I'd have probably got kidnapped. I was 23, 24 stone, fat, and I was just like, what am I actually doing? Like, what is going on? That is fucking rock bottom. And I was like, right, I just need to... One of the reasons I was so depressed at that point was because I was thought, not only has no one been this low, but no one's burnt as much as I've burnt here. I was like, really, it's going to be hard to rebuild. Yeah. But 5 years on, we did it. And I think that's also a key part of what I want to put out is I've been rock bottom, like, for so many different reasons. Look at me now. If I'd have seen a person like me who's successful saying to 20-year-old me, don't worry, you know, you will still be able to rebuild your life. You will still be able to have 5 children. You will still be able to homeschool. You know, not everything's going to collapse. Maybe I'd have been all right. Maybe I wouldn't have even been suicidal in the first place. Yeah. But when I was young and going through that shit, the reason I was so suicidal was I thought, no one's been through this. No one's been through this whilst also aiming at the things I'm aiming at. There's just no way I can hit those things anymore. It's all over for me. And I think for me, it's just, I wish I could talk back to myself back then.
I think in that sense of when what I kind of want to go back to is what you were saying about how the way that you ended up going down that path is you had someone that showed you a bit of compassion. And I think with a lot of young lads as well, kind of maybe in a similar situation, however, that seems to be something that's always how people end up going down that path in terms of there'll be somebody, they've not got anyone there, and this figure, whatever they're doing, it might be a bit dodgy, whatever, kind of gives them that kind of compassion, and they think, right, yeah, this is the way out, this is the only path to choose.
Yeah.
But I think having someone like yourself is good for a lot of young people who realise there's more to that, and it's not necessarily just these guys showing you from this one reason or whatever.
Mate, 100%. This is the other thing now. One of the reasons why I'm proud now, people say to me today, as a Christian man, do you regret, being covered head to toe? Literally, my belly button is blacked out. There's not a bit of my body when I'm not wearing a suit that doesn't have a tattoo on it. And people will say to me, do you regret that sort of thing? How can you justify, or do you regret even driving around in Range Rovers and things? Everyone still thinks I'm a fucking drug dealer. When I'm not in this suit, if I'm driving around Manchester in my blacked out Range Rover, no one thinks that I'm an articulate salesperson. They just don't. But that's also part of it. Because actually when these younger kids, assume these things and come to me and say, what are you about? Are you this? Are you that? It's like, no, mate, I work hard. I've got a loving wife. I've got children. This is what I do for a living, and this is what you should do. And also, I'm here for you. And I think genuinely, there's not been enough positive influence out there. There's been influence, and it's all negative. When you look at Blackpool as a town, it's one of the most deprived towns in the UK. There's kids there that are screaming out for an arm around them. There's kids there with loads of potential that are dying for opportunity. And I think sometimes these criminal underworlds are the only things that give them that opportunity. Genuinely. And I think that's part of what I'm doing. I think sales can be the thing. You can't convince me that there's a single person out there selling cocaine that wouldn't rather sell energy contracts legally if they could get the same amount of money.
We were talking about this in the car on the way here. We were saying that I won't name names, but there are people that we know that when we used to buy weed when we were in year 9, still do it now.
Yeah.
9 years later.
And they don't want to do it. They don't.
All these kids who are shotting and doing this and that now put their talents into something where they could efficiently earn money through sales or through something else or through business, they smash it.
Some of the kids I saw at the top doing that world who will probably now be locked up or locked in countries where they can't get back from, they would have been incredible CEOs. They would have been incredible business people. They would have been incredible, the salespeople. Kids in Blackpool, some of my amazing team members were people who had taken from positions where they were shot in weed, where they were shot in coke, and I was just showing them how they can quote unquote shot a different thing. It's like, well, why don't you shot an energy contract to a multi-site manufacturer? And he was like, yeah, right, I'll do that. Fucking piece of piss. And actually, these kids are the ones that are the best at it.
Yeah.
Because they just want that. They just want to achieve. Most people that are in the criminal world, they themselves are running from some kind of trauma.
Yeah,
they've just not had the time. I've not met a single violent young kid that I've not been able to just have a conversation with. And they just want that fucking path to run towards, genuinely. They just don't have it. So the only thing they can do is fend for themselves, and they don't really care about the consequences. Sad, really. But I think that's why overall, I think the world's changing in sales. And I think now the opportunity is these kids, for the first time ever, can jump on a Zoom call and sell something to anyone from anywhere. Yeah. And it's like you don't need to be on them corners anymore.
I think it's good as well because for a long time there hasn't really been many kind of positive male role models. I think that's the thing that, especially from a standpoint of the traditional things of look good, make money, business, but look after your mental, all of that kind of stuff. There's never really been somebody that just lays it out in a relatable way for young men to look at and be like, all right, cool, I can relate to this guy, but he's also doing something that I want to do. Yeah. Rather than being something that's so wildly far-fetched that I have no fucking idea how I can get to that.
Yeah, no, you just got to keep it real. The thing I constantly say is, I'm not convinced I've really invented anything myself. I'm just observing other people, putting them into practice, and I'm genuinely not convinced I'm that special. One of the things I want to motivate people is everything I am is basically a result of observing, putting things into practice, and then doing it again and again over a prolonged period of time. That's it. If you look at my top 200 traits, if you was to say what are the top 200 things that make you successful as a salesperson, and then if you was to, next to it, put a tick next to everyone that I'd invented out of thin air, none of them would have been inventions. They would have all have just been things that I've seen someone do, tried and applied, or read, tried and applied.
I think that thing that you were saying about the lack of role models, you see Peterson in 2016 when he was posting his lectures online, and some of the ideas, these complex psychological ideas that he's teaching at university, and he managed to boil it down to tidy room or something like that, or Tate in 2022 when he came out and boiled down all of his success and everything that he did in business to you need to work hard.
Yeah.
You need to get in shape. And they kind of the way that they were able to reach such a kind of affected group of people, it shows that those problems were there, and that it was just the way that they managed to package up their message and reach people. It showed the effect that it had. There was all these young men who had all these problems, and they were just crying out for someone. And, you know, whether or not everyone agrees with what Peterson and Tate say, it's undeniable that there is a lot of things that they say that resonate with
100%,
a lot of people.
100%. Like, you can't deny the fact that there's a need for it. I go back to that absence of a moral framework. You know, you look in the UK now, there's something like 1 million adult men registered to play in the Sunday football leagues. Those 1 million adult men would have been at a church on a Sunday just 40 years ago. But what would have been going down in them churches wasn't necessarily just lectures. It was a whole, you know, congregation of people who would work towards a shared societal goal. Like, there'd be role models in it, there'd be people chatting, they'd be talking about successes, they'd be talking about difficulties that they'd had that week, there'd be much more of a community. And I think now there just isn't that. I keep going back to it, but the amount of DMs I get, like, it's not a flex, it's actually quite sad. I don't know what it is. It's like people just need something. I don't know whether it's because of an absence of a family unit, I don't know if it's because of an absence of just genuine role models in the outside world, and I don't know what it is, but there is just a massive need for people like to look to captains to see how they should be living or to see what kind of things work, and there just isn't that at the minute. This is again why I'm so happy to de-anonymize my profile and just post everything. You know, people even say to me, you know, you don't mind posting pictures of your kids on, I don't care, like, it keeps it relatable, it keeps it real. Yeah, I'll do it. Don't matter where I'm going, everyone will see my kids anyway. Like, I'm not going to be able to keep them out of the public eye in terms of what my aims are. So it's like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll show people everything because it's all just real. It's all just relatable.
Yeah, I think that's to be honest, that's the key thing that everything's missing. Even when you look to people, I mean, to be honest, yeah, people like see Tate and obviously all of these new guys that have kind of emerged, and a lot of the time it does go back to straight up just looking at the stuff that's going on right now, which, buying Ferrari today, buying this today, buying that. But it's good having people that you can actually watch the journey as they're kind of getting it there, not just come out of the blue and they've got like 5 million followers or whatever.
Yeah, no, that's it. I'm still very much on my journey. You know, I recommend that everyone always has a sort of 5-year mission that they're on. You know, I genuinely right now, Carl von Clausewitz said, there are very few men, and they are the exceptions, that can think and feel beyond the present moment. Like, genuinely, I'd have to double check on what day it even was today. Like, I'm not joking. 5 days out of 7, I won't be able to tell you what day it is. And most of the time, I don't have any conception of what time it is, because in my head, I'm not even here today. Like, I don't know what today is. I'm working towards this 5-year goal. You know, where I'm at is working towards what life's going to look like when I'm 35, or I'm working towards what life's going to look like in 2029. Part of Kaylee's job, you know, my fiance, is she has to bring me into the present moment sometimes. She has to remind me that actually here and now does exist, because I'm just constantly like working towards this long-term goal. It's something that I actually recommend everyone does, is just have some kind of mission. You know, I said it right at the start. The minute you go on a mission on GTA, 2 things happen. Number 1, you're actually working towards something, so that will release dopamine. Yeah. But number 2, the outside world becomes totally irrelevant. You know, if you was to go on a mission on GTA, on the bit where it says follow this car, well, you're going to get instructions. It's going to say turn left now, turn right now, turn left now, go straight on. They're going to pop up. It's going to be cool. But also you're going to completely miss everything else that's going on in the outside world because you're locked in on your mission. And there's something in that, I'm telling you. So, like, having this long-term goal that I say to people all the time, the minute you define any kind of goal in terms of where you want your life to go, instantly, psychologically, things that would otherwise piss you off become irrelevant, and things that would otherwise be irrelevant become tools. If I said to you, you know, go and find my mobile phone, I think it's in, I don't know where it is, here's a list of 20 locations, and whoever finds it first can have £1 million. You'd be able to open my car boot and scan 100 items in a second, and you'd know whether any of them was my phone. But if my phone wasn't any of the items, and then I said, list me all the items you saw, you could probably only recall 2 or 3. But if you had that same time with the boot, and I said, now, to get £1 million, you just need to remember 10 items, you'd come back and you could remember 10 items. So honestly, the minute you set a goal with your life, the whole world just looks different. And this is the key thing that I'm trying to put out now. It's have a family. You know, dedicate yourself to a mission that isn't just yourself. Like, even if it's a fucking dog, like, that'll help. That's a start. But just have something outside of you, and then have a long-term thing that you're aiming at. Always.
I think it almost... I remember, like, a year ago doing an exercise like that, thinking about, like, well, hang on, I've never actually asked myself what I want to do or who I want to be. And I think that it almost seems too simple to work on the surface area of it.
Mate.
Like, think about who you want to be. It's kind of like, oh yeah, well, you know, I couldn't do that. And immediately people might just shy away from it or not really think that it's possible. But if you do engage in that, like pen and paper.
It's a process. Let me. So here's the thing, right? Honestly, this is the reason why I think in 5 years' time, you know, even me myself, I'll blow up, because currently there's about 100 people who have just started doing this 5-year process based on like the things I've been talking about lately, and I'm convinced, man, that and this is even with the successful people I've met. I'm convinced that this that I'm about to say now is actually fail-proof. I'm convinced there's no way this can fail. In fact, if somebody wants to get in touch with me, like I'll send you 500 quid if you can show me that you've done what I'm about to say and it hasn't worked. Because I literally think it's science. So for me, humans are aiming animals, okay? We've got eyes on the front of our heads. We like to see where we're going. Dopamine is released in our brains, not when we achieve a goal, but when we move towards a goal as humans. That's how our brain circuits are fired and wired. If you do a 3-year degree, at the end of your degree, once it's finished, the game collapses and you find yourself scratching your head wondering what to do next. And that's because actually the whole game has collapsed. You don't then get endless dopamine because you've completed the game. It's holy shit, I need a new game to play. So humans are aiming animals. We know that. We like to see where we're going. Humans are also animals that receive dopamine when they move towards a goal. So then let's take a few more things into account. If I said to you now, I'll give you £1 million, £1 million if you can come to my house, okay? 2 things would determine how quick you got there, especially if I said it to both of you or to the whole of the UK. £1 million to whoever gets to my house first. What wouldn't help you is if you just started running around. If you just went outside and started fucking running around, the chances of you turning up at my house would be very slim. 2 pieces of information or 2 things would be really useful. If you had the destination of where you wanted to go, i.e. if I gave you my address, that'd be really fucking good. Because what that would then allow you to do is put it into your maps. Yeah. And then you'd put my address into your sat-nav, right? So you'd have an address and then you'd have the directions to get there. Now for me, the reason this 5-year goal setting thing is so important, right? If you can set yourself a destination of what you want your life to look like in 2029, and you do that now in 2024, you've got what 90% of most humans don't. You've got a destination. Like, you genuinely have. Most people are still fucking running around outside wondering where my house is. You've got a destination. Then what you can do is you can say, right, if that's where I need to be for that particular goal in 2029, where do I need to be in 2028 for that to be possible in 2029? Okay, right, I'll step it back. If that's where I want to be in 2028 for that to be achievable in 2029, then where do I need to be in 2027? What do things need to look like then? All right, okay. If that's what things need to look like in 2027 in order for me to hit that 2028, what does 2026 need to look like across these different areas? Right, okay. If that's the case, by 2026, for me to achieve that, like for that to even be possible, what does things need to look like by 2025? Right, okay, so this is how things need to look by this time next year for that to even be possible, okay. So for things to look like this by this time in 12 months, what do things need to look like in 6 months' time? Right, okay, so this is where I'm at, and I need to get there within 6 months, otherwise that 12-month things ain't happening. Right, okay, so if I can get there in 6 months' time, or to even get there in 6 months, where do I need to be in 3 months? Right, okay. So to get there in 6 months, I need to be at this milestone within 3 months. Okay, and I'll write down what the things are. Okay, so to get there in 3 months, where do I need to be in 1 month? So from now until the end of August, for me to achieve that by November time, where do I need to be by the end of August? Right, okay, I need to be there by the end of August. Right. So to be there in 4 weeks, where do I need to be by the end of next week? Like, what do I fucking need to do? Right, okay, I need to do that by the end of next week. Right, if I want to be there by next Thursday, what do I need to fucking do tomorrow? Right, okay, I'll do that then. If I need to do that tomorrow, what should I be doing with these 4 hours I've got today? And honestly, this is the point. When I was 23 stone, I said, in 5 years' time, I want to have an 8-pack and be able to run a marathon. Okay, I've now qualified to run the Montane Arctic Spine, which is a 200+ mile race in the Arctic Circle. I also said I want to be known as one of the best people in the world in sales. I said that. I'm now known, I will never say that, but I'm known very valued in the world of sales, let's say. And actually, if I want to be real, I'm one of the most sought after sales directors in Europe. Okay, that's fucking interesting. I also said that I wanted to be homeschooling my kids with a woman that isn't working because she's also raising children with me. I'm currently totally unlocked from life, filming a podcast on a Thursday with the woman who's the mother to my kids, who are all homeschooled, sat in the same room. And I also said, from a purpose and meaning perspective, I'd love to be helping people. I'd love to be in a position where I can talk to people who were where I was, or even where I am right now. That'd be cool. In fact, God, I'll do you this deal. If this 5-year thing works, I'll just go and tell other people about it. How about that? Fast forward to where we are now, every single step has worked. Yeah. Like, you know, genuinely, I think the issue most people have is it's cliche. Where do you want your life to be in 5 years? And they'll spend a couple of minutes thinking about it. You're doing it all completely wrong. Like, I would open my notes on my phone and I would write mind and body. I would open another section and I'd write work and career. I would open another section and I'd write family and relationships. And I'd open another section, call it purpose and meaning. You might not even know what that bit's going to have in it right now. And you're certainly not going to have the answers straight away. It would take me a week or two to start populating these certain areas. I'd be thinking, right, what do I want my body to look like, to feel like, you know, by the time I'm 30? Do I want to be fit? Do I want to be big? Do I want to be lean? Do I want to be healthy? Do I want to be able to fight? You know, what do I want my life to look like from that perspective? From a mind perspective, do I want to be stressing out every day? Do I want to be chilled out? Do I want to be still intelligent because I'm spending time reading, or do I want to have put a bit of that stuff away and let it fizzle out? Okay, that's interesting. Genuinely, and I did it for all of my different areas. I was like, right, well, that's what I want it to look like. And I didn't necessarily know what the job was going to be, but I knew what the outcome was going to be. Yeah. I'd be living in a house that sort of looked like this, with an income that was sort of that, with this that looked like that. So let's talk practically. So let's talk about when I did this, when I was 24 years old. So at this point, 23, 24 stone, I'd just basically burnt every single sales job I'd ever had, including some very senior sales roles. I had a relationship with a woman that didn't like me and kids that didn't like me, and I was living in some crappy rented cook box on some housing estate in the upper class area of Blackpool, whatever that means. And I was like, right, what does this all look like? So again, I just mapped out. So if I want to be known as being the best in the world in sales in 5 years, what will that look like? So to be the best in the world in sales by 2023, or maybe 2024, I was thinking, right, you're probably going to have been sales director somewhere reputable, and you'll have definitely had to have broken a load of records. Maybe you've even done it twice, like 2 years in a row. You can't just get away with doing it once and then call yourself the best. You need to have probably even received a settlement based on how good you are. So I was like, right, okay. So if I'm to be there by 2023, as in a sales director who's broken 2 years worth of records, that means that by 2022, I need to be a sales director who's broken at least 1 year's worth of records. I was like, holy fuck. That means that by 2020, I need to be a sales director. That means that by 2019, I need to be the best salesperson on a team, ready to jump into the position of sales director, either when it comes at that organization or when it comes somewhere else. That means that by 2019, I need to just, or whatever year it was, the year before, I need to just be on a team, you know, because to be the best on a team the year after, I just need to be on a team. Then I was like, right, I just need to get back into energy. I reverse engineered it all the way back until I found myself applying for a job, which was interestingly with the first company I worked for. But the thing that most people won't realise is the job I applied for was for a £25,000 salary less than the job I left the previous time I left them. But I knew it was a crucial first step on that ladder. Yeah. I'd reverse engineered the roadmap out, and all roads had led to me needing to be back on a sales team as a salesperson in energy, like it or lump it. And unfortunately, because of how I'd burnt my bridges, I maybe wasn't going to go and smack an 80 grand basic, a 90 grand basic. So that first sales role that I got back into, I took the same wages as I was on when I was 20. But I knew that would be that relevant first step on the ladder. And then 6 months in, when the appointment bookers were failing and the appointment booker left, the manager left, I came to the business and I said, look, I'm willing to just take on that team. And I'll do it for free. I don't want any wages. I don't want a job title increase. I don't want fucking anything. Just give me that team. I'll do it. Most people at that point, if someone said, you're going to manage 6 people, you're not going to get a pay rise, they'd bring the trade union in. They'd say, you can't do this to me. This is illegal. I said I would have paid them 25 grand of that salary just to even get the chance to manage them. Because I knew then, I was like, fucking hell, think of that 5-year goal, Jordan. If you get these 6 people and you start making these work, when that sales director eventually goes, it is really going to be a no-brainer for them to give you the job. Lo and behold, 2 years in, sales director went, bam, I found myself in that position. I was like, oh, God, this 5-year plan is now starting to work. And like I said, across all areas, like, the thing that's motivating me now is if I don't do this, it's going to destabilize that whole 5 years.
Yeah.
It's going to rock everything. So when I'm setting my vision of what I want my life to look like in 5 years, the other thing I'll set, and I'll get really articulate with, is what I want my life to not look like in 5 years. So if everything goes right in 5 years, this is what my life will look like. But if everything goes really wrong, everything that could possibly go wrong, what will life look like?
Yeah.
And I have this other vision where I'm sat in a Wetherspoons trying to convince people that I used to do sales. You know, I have this other vision where I've got 5 kids who don't speak to me because I've blown up at them, or because I've done something, or because I've maybe doubled down too much at work and still not achieved anything. And then I'm really fucked it. So it's like, right, that's what I'm running away from. So honestly, on any one day, I've got this 5-year vision and something I'm running towards, but also something I'm running away from on the days where the motivation isn't enough. Some days it's going to be a pull thing that motivates me, and sometimes it's going to be a push thing that motivates me, genuinely. But that whole 5-year thing, like, I'm not convinced. You could make a decision to become one of the hardest men in England, right? If that's your goal, that's fine, but there might be some crazy steps you might need to insert. You could make a decision to become a billionaire. That's fine, but know that along that 5-year journey, you might have 3 or 4 steps that require you to risk everything.
Yeah.
Like, you will have those steps, but you can map out the roadmap, and there it is. And actually, how many stories are there of entrepreneurs who just tried and tried again until eventually it worked? So it's just like finding that roadmap. So for me, I think once you've got that 5-year goal for your life, you have the ability to take yourself out of that present moment. And I think it's that will get you your goals, whatever they are. I say it, and again, it's cliche, but if you live 5 years like no one else will, you'll live the rest of your life like no one else can.
Yeah.
The rest of your actual life. Like, if someone just makes a conscious decision now, I'm going to live from 24 to 29 like no one else will that's my age. Like, no one else who I know. I'm going to just make conscious decision to live like this for 5 years. By 2029, you'll never be living like the normies ever again. You just won't.
How do you think people should deal with adversity and unexpected challenges when they come up during that 5 years?
Yeah, so I think one of the reasons society is struggling so much right now is because adversity and challenges exist. They're real. You can't get away from them. And a lot of the time, the thing that gets you through it is having that long-term plan. Because when you've got a long-term plan, you'll know that, look, over 5 years, there's going to be some bad things happen that sometimes slow the plan down. But also over 5 years, there's going to be some successes, maybe that weren't expected, that will speed the plan up. So the idea when you've got this 5-year plan is to try to not react to the lows too much and try to not react to the highs too much. You know, as you're moving forward in life, one thing I can assure you, and this is something my dad told me that sticks with me today, the highs get higher and the lows get lower. Yeah. Like, the more successful you get, those feelings of despair or sadness that you might have had at the start of your journey when you was 18, you'll still fucking have them at 50, and they'll be 10 times worse because the responsibility will probably be 100 times more. But the highs will also be 100 times higher. So for me, it's like having that long-term goal and then just having the ability to understand that, look, sometimes things are going to happen, but you've just got to dig in because you're in it for the long run. You're in it for 5 years. But likewise, sometimes things are going to happen. Like a customer that landed out of nowhere, that's like, whoa, I didn't expect that. But it's like, yeah, that doesn't mean I get a day off now for 3 months. Yeah. That's just one of the good things. So you just got to do the same shit. You've got to detach from the outcome of what you're doing day by day and just understand it's just a process I'm going through for 5 years. I'll get the 5-year outcome. Some days are going to be good. Some days are going to be bad. Like, some days I'll feel shit. Some days I'll feel great. Every day I'll be doing the same thing from a work effort and you know, attitude perspective.
Would you say then your prime motivator is just having that tunnel vision towards the end goal?
Yeah, so for me, the prime motivator is that end goal.
Yeah,
it's that end goal. I mean, even a lot of the best racehorses in the world will wear blinkers. And the reason they'll have blinkers is so they can get tunnel vision, so they can block out what the other horses are doing, or the distractions, and they can focus on what it is that they're out there to achieve. I'm so focused on my end goal at the minute, like, there's not much that could happen in the day-to-day world that would destabilise me, unless I'm on a mission on Grand Theft Auto, and unless this problem that's occurred is directly impacting my ability to carry out this mission, I'm not really bothered about it.
Yeah.
Like, truthfully, that's my motivation.
It seems like you've kind of always had that sense of that kind of logical plan of thinking, in terms of, even when we go back to what you were saying about your GCSEs, kind of thinking, all right, if I learn every single page of this book, then I know that when it comes down to my exams, I'm going to ace everything. So do you think it's been kind of like a gradual thing of you thinking like that, or do you think you've just always been like that from the get?
Maybe I'm a bit of a weirdo, but yeah, I've known since the day I was born that I'm going to do things in the world. I don't know what they are, but they were just incredible things. And I've always known that everything, I've never really had to try that hard with a lot of the stuff. I've had to try to apply myself and just like focus myself on it. But then when I'm doing it, I've never really had to try that hard at it. Like, I've always, as a kid, the motivating factor with the GCSEs was, I've got a worldview on life that people think is different. Like, I was convinced that the whole education system was rubbish. But I was like, I just need to get 14 A stars just so I can say I've completed the game and it's still shit.
Yeah.
Like, because otherwise, if all I've got is 14 Fs and I'm slagging off the education system, nobody will believe me.
Yeah.
So I was like, I just need to get the credibility and then say it's still rubbish, because all I've done is remembered photosynthesis on a leaf, but that's not going to help anyone. And everyone's like, yeah, good point. And it's like, so for me, I guess what I've always been is driven. To what, I don't know. Like, you know, there's a Napoleon quote that says, I am driven to an end of which I don't know. As soon as I have reached it, as soon as I have accomplished it, an atom shall suffice to destroy me. But until then, the whole forces of mankind can't stop me. So I think all my life, even as that kid that was getting beat down on by my mum, when I was getting fucking fly swatted, you know, for 15 fly swats in a row, I was just thinking, it's all right. I'm learning something. It's all part of a process. Don't worry, because long term you're going to achieve something. It's all genuinely. Even when my mum was beating me up as a kid, I just used to think, well, actually, she's taught me something great here, which is within 3 seconds your body releases adrenaline, and nothing that the person does past that point actually hurts. Yeah. So like from that point, I was like, sound, I'm up for anything. Like, nothing actually hurts. You get adrenaline. Like my body's released this thing where I don't even get hit. So it's like I've just always looked for a logical. What's the logical thing that will help me achieve the goal, sort of thing. So yeah, my mind has always worked like that, I think, but it's been driven since the day I was born. I don't know how, I don't know why. It's a curse sometimes.
Jordan, if you were to articulate in 3 sentences your new 5-year plan, what would they be?
Okay, good question. It's the articulation in 3 sentences bit that I'm struggling with there. So I would say, number 1, to become known globally and synonymous with the word sales. Okay, so that would be number 1, to be globally synonymous with the word of sales. Number 2 would be to grow myself to a position where I have got the genuine credibility and influence to make a difference in the UK. And on a bit of a global level as well, with real things that matter.
Yeah.
Like family things, country things, real things. And then I'd say the third thing would be, or the third sentence would just be, to remind everyone and to continue to inspire people into having families and to just living outside of themselves. So those would be my 3 things. It would be ultimately to grow into being known worldwide for sales. Sales is the thing that will have unlocked my life, but then to use whatever position, I mean, for me, it's everything I do is a mission. The reason I'm named Jordan Nile, you know, from the River Jordan to the River Nile, I've had it bred into me that my goal in life is to one day earn enough money to regenerate and redevelop the whole area from the River Jordan to the River Nile. So I would also add an element of that. I think it's topical what's going on in the world right now. One of the things I'm so locked in for is because I know, look at what's going on in Palestine, look at what's going on in my homeland. By the time I'm 35, genuinely, I'm aiming at becoming a billionaire. Like, I need that. I need that wealth. I need that resource. It's not for me. I don't care about it. I would drive a Nissan Micra every single day, but I'd still aim at being that billionaire because I need that. I need to be able to influence and change the world in that respect. So for me, I would say, you know, the 5-year plan, let's start again, re-articulated, known worldwide for sales, genuinely making a difference for things that aren't just in the world of sales and directly impacting me. And also for me to have started making impacts into making my name a household name. You know, when my dad arrived in the UK, he was the only Rassas in the UK. We still are the only Rassasses in the UK. We just happen to have 7 of us now because I've had so many kids and I've got a brother. But the reality of the situation is, I said to my dad, I owe it to him for everyone in the UK, for everyone in the world to know the name Rassas. Like, truthfully, Israel gave him that name. They gave my family that name, which directly translates to lead bullets. It was designed to be quite an abominable name that would make people remember us and would be easily identifiable. I said, well, let everyone know it. I said, Dad, everyone will know that name. Believe me. So, yeah.
Jordan, I believe that in 5 years, if we were to sit down and have this conversation again, that you will have achieved everything that you just said. It has been such a pleasure to speak to you today. Thank you so much. Where can people find you?
Best place right now is my Twitter @TheLionGlass or Instagram @TheLionGlass as well. But I wouldn't worry too much. You know, the plan's gone wrong if you're having to search too hard to find me in a couple of years. So, yeah, those places would be a good place to start.
Perfect.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, boys.
Cheers.
Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much.